The first thing I heard that morning was my husband shouting my name from the front door. Not the gentle way he usually called me. Not the tired voice I had grown used to hearing after his long days at work. This time, his voice was sharp, furious, and frightened all at once. I came running from the kitchen with flour still covering my hands, and the moment I saw his face, my heart sank. He was holding his phone in one hand and staring at me as if I were a stranger. Then he said the words that changed everything. "Someone used my bank card to spend nearly $20,000 yesterday." I froze. Before I could even answer, he added that the bank had traced the transactions to luxury stores, an expensive jewelry boutique, a designer clothing shop, and a high-end furniture showroom. And then his eyes narrowed. He had already decided who was responsible. Me. What he didn't know was that while he had been receiving those frightening bank alerts, I had been at home all day, trying to figure out how to stretch our grocery money until payday. And what neither of us knew was that the person who had taken his card had been standing just 3 feet away from me when the first purchase was made. If you believe that kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can change even the most broken families, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. My name is Claire, and for almost 6 years, I believed I had married the kind of man every woman dreamed about. Daniel was hardworking, patient, protective, and deeply devoted to his family. He wasn't a billionaire or some perfect movie hero. He was simply a good man who worked long hours, paid his bills, remembered birthdays, and always made sure there was enough food on the table. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. Our life wasn't luxurious, but it was comfortable. We had a small garden in the backyard, an old gray sofa that had survived 2 moves, and a kitchen table with a scratch across the middle from the first apartment we had shared after getting married. The person who made our life difficult was Daniel's mother, Margaret. From the beginning, Margaret had never accepted me. She had been widowed when Daniel was 22, and she had raised him alone. Because of that, she believed she had earned a permanent place in every decision he made. She knew what he should eat, where he should work, how he should spend his money, and most importantly, who he should have married. I had always felt that she considered me an intruder who had stolen her son. At first, I tried desperately to win her approval. I brought her homemade meals. I remembered her medical appointments. I bought her birthday gifts even when our own budget was tight. When she complained that her house was too cold, I quietly bought her an electric heater. When her washing machine broke, Daniel and I helped pay for a replacement. But nothing was ever enough. If I cooked dinner, she would complain that it wasn't the way Daniel liked it. If I bought groceries, she would say I was wasting money. If I suggested that Daniel and I take a weekend trip together, she would suddenly develop some problem that required her son's attention. Daniel always tried to stay neutral. That was his weakness. He loved his mother, and I understood that. But sometimes loving someone meant refusing to let them hurt the person standing beside you. And Daniel struggled to do that. Over the years, Margaret became increasingly dependent on him. She needed help with rent, bills, repairs, medical expenses, and shopping. Daniel never complained. He simply gave her money whenever she asked. I worried about it, but I rarely confronted him. I knew how much guilt he carried. He believed that because his mother had sacrificed for him, he owed her everything. I used to tell myself that one day she would understand that I wasn't trying to take her son away. I was trying to build a family with him. Then, one Monday morning, Daniel left for work earlier than usual. Before leaving, he placed his bank card inside the small wooden bowl near the kitchen counter. He had planned to stop by the bank after work because he needed to make a large payment on our house. I remember seeing the card there. I remember thinking that I needed to remind him to take it. Then Margaret arrived. She hadn't called. She simply walked through the front door with the spare key Daniel had given her years earlier. I was folding laundry upstairs when I heard the door close. When I came downstairs, she was standing in the kitchen. She looked unusually cheerful. That should have been my first warning. She asked me where Daniel was, and I told her he had gone to work. She nodded casually. Then she stayed for coffee. We rarely had peaceful conversations, so her sudden friendliness made me uncomfortable. She asked about the weather, complimented the curtains, and even told me the house looked nice. For nearly 30 minutes, everything seemed strangely normal. Then she left. I didn't think anything of it. Not until that evening. Daniel came home looking exhausted. He barely took off his coat before checking his phone. Then his face changed. I watched him scroll through his banking app. One notification. Then another. Then another. His breathing became heavier. He looked at me. I knew immediately that something was wrong. He asked if I had used his card. I said no. He asked if I had bought anything online. Again I said no. Then he showed me the transactions. The first purchase had been at an upscale department store. The second was at a jewelry boutique. The third was at a luxury furniture showroom. Then there were charges for designer shoes, handbags, cosmetics, and expensive electronics. The total was horrifying. $19,742. My stomach dropped. Daniel stared at me. I could see the suspicion in his eyes. I wanted to scream. Instead, I calmly told him I hadn't touched his card. He didn't answer. That silence hurt more than an accusation. Then he asked me who else had been inside the house. I hesitated. And then I remembered Margaret. When I said her name, Daniel's expression hardened. But instead of believing me, he asked why his mother would steal from him. I didn't have an answer. The argument grew quickly. He accused me of hiding something. I accused him of trusting his mother more than his wife. Neither of us realized that someone was listening from the hallway. Margaret. She had returned. And when Daniel opened the front door and saw her standing there, she didn't look surprised. She looked prepared. She calmly told him that she had come back because she had forgotten something. Daniel asked her whether she had seen his bank card. Margaret immediately became offended. She acted shocked that he could even ask. Then she looked directly at me. She said that perhaps his wife was trying to blame her because she knew Daniel would never suspect her. That sentence destroyed something inside me. I had spent years trying to earn that woman's trust. And now she was willing to sacrifice me to protect herself. Daniel stood between us, confused and angry. Then his phone rang. It was the bank's fraud department. They had detected unusual activity and wanted confirmation that the purchases were legitimate. Daniel told them they were not. The bank explained that security footage from one of the stores showed a woman using his card. They had already frozen the account. Daniel asked if they could send the footage. They said they could. Margaret suddenly became very quiet. That was the moment I knew. She had taken the card. But there was more. Much more. The following morning, Daniel received the footage. He opened it at the kitchen table. I stood behind him. On the screen was Margaret. She was smiling as she walked through a luxury store carrying bags. She was wearing the same blue coat she had worn when she visited our house. Daniel watched silently. Then another video appeared. Margaret entered a jewelry store. She purchased a diamond bracelet. Then she went to a furniture showroom. She ordered a new dining set, a large television, and a bedroom suite. She wasn't acting like someone who had accidentally used the wrong card. She was shopping like someone who believed the money belonged to her. Daniel closed his eyes. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he asked me something I will never forget. "Why didn't you tell me sooner that she had been here?" I looked at him and felt tears burning my eyes. I told him I had told him. I told him she came into the house while he was at work. He remembered. But what happened next shocked us both. The bank called again. They had discovered that the card had not been used only once. There had been several withdrawals over the previous 2 weeks. Cash withdrawals. Online purchases. Transfers. The total was no longer $19,742. It was $31,580. Daniel looked like the floor had disappeared beneath him. His mother's shopping spree had been only the final part of a much larger theft. Then the bank investigator asked him whether he had ever shared his PIN with anyone. Daniel said no. But I suddenly remembered something. Several months earlier, Margaret had asked Daniel to help her pay a medical bill. He had given her his wallet while he went into the bathroom because she said she needed the card number. At the time, neither of us thought anything about it. But now the pieces were falling into place. She hadn't just taken the card. She had memorized the PIN. Daniel drove to his mother's house. I begged him not to go alone. He told me he needed answers. 3 hours passed. Then 4. He didn't call. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty bowl where his bank card had once been. I kept thinking about how quickly a marriage could collapse. One accusation, one lie, one secret. I wondered whether Daniel would ever look at me the same way again. At almost midnight, I heard the front door open. Daniel walked inside. His eyes were red. He looked older than he had that morning. He sat beside me. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he told me everything. When he confronted Margaret, she initially denied everything. But when he showed her the security footage, she broke down. She admitted taking the card. She admitted making the purchases. But her explanation wasn't what either of us expected. She said she hadn't done it because she hated us. She said she did it because she was terrified. Margaret had accumulated enormous debts. Credit cards. Loans. Unpaid bills. She had been borrowing from one person to pay another. She had lied to Daniel repeatedly because she couldn't bear to admit that she was drowning financially. The luxury purchases were not all for herself. Some were things she had sold. Some had been returned for cash. Some had been purchased because she believed she could resell them at a profit. But the diamond bracelet was different. She had bought it for herself. And the new furniture was for her house. Daniel asked her why she didn't simply ask him for help. Margaret cried. She said she had asked too many times. She was ashamed. She believed Daniel would eventually realize she was a burden. And she was afraid he would choose me over her. Those words hit me harder than I expected. Because for years, that had been the battle either of us had spoken aloud. Margaret was afraid of losing her son. I was afraid of losing my husband. And Daniel had been trapped between us. When he came home that night, I expected him to tell me he wanted a divorce. Instead, he sat beside me and apologized. Not for his mother's actions. For his own. He admitted that he had allowed his fear of hurting his mother to repeatedly hurt me. He admitted that every time he stayed silent when she insulted me, he was teaching her that she could continue. He admitted that when he doubted me after the bank charges appeared, he had made me feel like a stranger in my own marriage. I cried. Not because everything was suddenly fixed. It wasn't. The money was gone. Trust had been damaged. Margaret had committed a serious crime. And there were consequences that couldn't simply disappear because she was family. Daniel reported the theft. Margaret had to face the bank, the authorities, and the reality of what she had done. For the first time in years, Daniel set boundaries. He told his mother that he loved her, but love did not mean protecting her from the consequences of her decisions. He helped her find a financial counselor. He arranged for her to receive legitimate assistance. But he refused to give her unlimited access to his money again. And something unexpected happened. Margaret began changing. Not overnight. Not magically. But slowly. She sold many of the things she had bought. She returned what she could. She apologized to the stores. She began working part-time despite being embarrassed by her situation. And one afternoon, nearly 6 months after the theft, she came to our house. She didn't use her spare key. She knocked. That small sound meant more to me than she could ever know. I opened the door. She stood there holding a small cardboard box. Inside was the diamond bracelet. She told me she had managed to recover it after returning several other items. Then she said something I will never forget. She told me she wanted me to have it. I refused. I told her it belonged to her. She shook her head. She said it had been purchased with money that wasn't hers. She didn't want to keep a reminder of the person she had become. I still didn't take it. Instead, we sold it and used the money to repay part of what she had stolen. It wasn't enough to erase everything. But it was a beginning. Months passed. Our marriage became stronger. Not because the betrayal had never happened, but because we finally learned how to face difficult truths instead of hiding them. Daniel stopped trying to keep everyone happy. I stopped trying to earn love from someone who had decided not to give it. And Margaret slowly learned that being part of a family didn't mean controlling everyone in it. One Sunday afternoon, I was sitting in the backyard when Margaret came outside carrying 3 cups of tea. She sat beside me. For a few minutes, we watched the wind move through the trees. Then she apologized again. This time, I believed her. I told her I couldn't forget what happened. She nodded. I told her forgiveness would take time. She nodded again. Then I told her that I was willing to try. And she began to cry. Not the manipulative tears I had seen before. Real tears. The kind that come when someone finally realizes how close they came to losing everything. Years later, when people asked me what saved our marriage, I never said money. Money nearly destroyed it. I never said love either. Love was there from the beginning. What saved us was honesty, boundaries, accountability, and the courage to admit when someone we love has hurt us. Because sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. Sometimes forgiveness means saying, "What happened was wrong, and I will not allow it to happen again, but I am willing to believe you can become better." Margaret never became the mother-in-law I had dreamed of. But eventually, she became someone I could trust. And that was enough. Daniel never forgot the night he came home believing his marriage was over. He later told me that when he stood at the door that evening, holding his phone and staring at me, he thought he was looking at the woman who had betrayed him. But in the end, he realized something heartbreaking. He had been looking at the woman who had spent 6 years trying to protect their family while he was too afraid to protect her. And sometimes, the greatest tragedy isn't that someone makes a terrible mistake. It's that we almost lose the people who love us because we refuse to see the truth. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and scroll away. Like the video, share it with someone who believes families can heal, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us continue telling stories about forgiveness, courage, second chances, and the complicated ways people learn to love one another. And before we end, I have one special request for you. Comment, "Second chances," below if you believe people can truly change when they take responsibility for their mistakes. Because somewhere out there, someone may be carrying shame for something they did years ago. Someone may believe they are beyond forgiveness. Someone may be waiting for a chance to make things right. And perhaps your comment will remind them that making a mistake does not have to be the final chapter of their story. Some wounds never disappear completely. But sometimes they become scars. And scars have a remarkable purpose. They remind us that something hurt us once. But they also remind us that we survived. Claire's marriage survived. Daniel learned to stand beside his wife without abandoning his mother. Margaret learned that love cannot be demanded, purchased, or stolen. And Claire learned perhaps the hardest lesson of all. You can forgive someone without forgetting what they did. You can love someone without allowing them to hurt you. And you can give someone a second chance without giving them permission to break your heart a second time. Because family isn't simply about sharing blood. Sometimes family is about learning how to respect the hearts that chose to stay.